My daughter-in-law was wearing my late wife's pearl earrings. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Something terribly wrong. Because those earrings always rested beside my wife's memorial photo. Those teardrop pearls were something my Carol only wore on our wedding anniversaries. Now they dangled from Diane's ears. They swayed with every bite she took and every fake rehearsed smile she flashed across the dinner table. Diane was not wearing them to honor my wife's memory. She wore them like a cheap trophy. A silent declaration that she had completely taken ownership of this house. Welcome back to Dad's Real Life Revenge. Before I tell you about the terrible things that happened to my family, leave a comment with the number 7 to give me the strength to share this pain. If family loyalty matters to you, subscribe because every word in this story matters. My chest tightened as heavy pressure crushed my lungs. Rage surged through my spine like an overloaded electrical current. I glanced at Marcus, my son, sitting across the table. He was busy cutting his steak, his rough hands still stained with engine grease from the repair shop. Those hands represented honest labor and sacrifice. My boy was completely blind to the insult sitting right in front of him. He laughed casually and placed food onto the plate of the wife he spoiled endlessly. He had no idea that the foundation of his home was already being hollowed out from underneath him. The contrast was unbearable. On one side stood my son's honesty and hard work. On the other stood Diane's selfish luxury and calculated ambition. She brushed her hair aside on purpose, making sure the precious earrings caught the light. Her smile looked like glossy paint covering a block of rotten concrete. The instincts I had developed after decades as an engineer told me one thing: I needed to act. I lifted my eyes toward the family portrait hanging on the wall across from me. My Carol was there, wearing that gentle smile I had loved for decades. She was a woman of numbers and order. She always knew how to manage every expense to keep this household standing on the strongest possible foundation. Carol taught Marcus to respect every bolt and every joint in the structure of life. My son grew up inside that solid framework. He was hardworking, honest, and incapable of lying. Then Diane came along and disrupted the entire system. I still remember the first day Marcus brought Diane home to meet us. She walked into the house wearing an expensive designer dress without a single wrinkle. Her polished appearance immediately captivated my poor son, but her eyes could not fool me. Those were not the eyes of a guest visiting someone's home. They were the eyes of an auditor silently evaluating assets. Her gaze moved from the oak grandfather clock to the brass candle holders on the shelf. She was calculating their value with cold equations inside her head. Marcus believed he had found a safe harbor. In reality, he had invited home someone who specialized in weakening foundations from the inside. While my son bent over engines at the repair shop, with grease-stained hands earning every dollar honestly, Diane only thought about spending money. That contrast tore at my mind every single day. Diane claimed she wanted to help me clear out Carol's belongings so I could let go of the past, while she was secretly using our money to build another nest somewhere else. The anger inside me reached its peak as I watched the pearl earrings sway against her neck. I forced myself to stay calm so I would not ruin my son's lunch. I needed to inspect every connection point in this family's financial structure. My engineering instincts began activating a secret investigation plan. I decided to quietly examine every small detail connected to Diane. And later that same afternoon, when I visited the nursing center to see my brother Raymond, I discovered a horrifying truth far beyond anything I had calculated. If there was ever a man whose self-respect was stronger than engineering standards themselves, it was my younger brother Raymond. He had once been a highly skilled mechanic, a man who tightened every bolt with absolute precision using his own 2 hands. But after a brutal stroke, half of his body became completely paralyzed. His entire mobility system collapsed. Even so, his spirit and dignity never surrendered to fate. Marcus loved his uncle deeply. My son always told me he set aside 15% of his monthly income to pay for the best physical therapy treatments for Raymond. But that afternoon, when I walked into the nursing center, the sight before me made my heart tighten painfully. Raymond sat curled up in an old wheelchair near the corner of the room. His eyes stared blankly out the window in complete loneliness. No therapist was massaging his twisted arm. No doctor stood beside him offering support. I hurried over and grabbed his ice-cold hand. Rage slowly ignited inside my chest. I immediately demanded to speak with the person in charge of the facility. The nurse looked at me with sympathy before letting out a tired sigh. She explained that they had been forced to reduce Raymond's therapy sessions. For the past 2 months, the additional payments had never arrived. They had sent multiple notices and reminders, but the family never responded. Inside my head, alarm bells exploded violently. The pressure inside the system was shifting too suddenly. The money Marcus worked himself to exhaustion to earn was leaking somewhere. Diane was the one directly responsible for paying those bills. She always assured everyone that every payment had been handled properly. Sweat formed across my forehead, even though the building was fully air-conditioned. My suspicion hardened into a crushing weight inside my mind. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I struggled to control my anger. I decided to call Diane directly and confront her about the missing money. I wanted to hear what excuse this parasite would invent to cover a crack this massive. I stood at the end of the nursing home hallway and dialed Diane's number. Each ring stretched my nerves tighter and tighter. She finally answered after a long, calculated pause. Her voice slid through the phone as smoothly as high-grade machine oil. She greeted me sweetly as if nothing had happened. I went straight to the point and asked coldly about Raymond's therapy payments. Diane stayed silent for a second before letting out a soft laugh. "Oh, Dad, I am so sorry. The bank's automatic transfer system must have glitched again. I will go directly to the branch tomorrow morning and fix everything myself. Please do not worry." The flawless calmness in her voice immediately triggered my engineering instincts. I sensed a massive structural crack hidden beneath the surface. A normal person would panic after hearing that her husband's uncle had his treatment reduced. But Diane reacted in the exact opposite way. She answered like a machine already programmed with carefully prepared excuses. The deception was terrifyingly smooth. I ended the call without another word. The load-bearing limit of her lies had finally entered the danger zone. I knew the system was suffering from a serious leak. Marcus's money was still flowing out every month, but the destination had clearly been rerouted. My chest rose and fell as rage compressed itself deep inside me. I could not dismantle this trap without solid physical evidence. A good engineer never reaches conclusions based on assumptions alone. I needed a proper field inspection to catch the saboteur in the act. For the next 2 days, I quietly tracked my daughter-in-law's schedule. My patience was rewarded on a fateful Thursday afternoon. I drove my old mud-stained pickup truck through one of the wealthiest districts downtown. Something deep in my professional instincts pushed me to glance toward the parking lot of an extravagant establishment. And instantly my eyes locked onto a familiar white sedan. It was Diane's car parked directly in front of an expensive restaurant. The real earthquake struck that Thursday afternoon. I was sitting inside the cabin of my old mud-stained pickup truck, parked across the street from the most expensive restaurant in the city, a place where one dinner cost more than an entire week of Marcus's hard-earned wages. And there it was, my daughter-in-law's white sedan parked proudly in front of the entrance. I shut off the engine and silently watched through the narrow gap beside the window. Every connection point inside my mind began locking together into one complete picture. The restaurant doors slowly opened. Diane stepped outside looking like a completely different person. Gone was the fake, modest appearance she wore whenever she visited me in the countryside. Now she looked radiant and glamorous in expensive designer clothes. But what truly made the blood in my veins turn cold was the man walking beside her. Diane had her arm wrapped around a stranger dressed in a luxury suit. The two of them laughed together with shameless satisfaction. The man opened the car door for her and placed his hand around her waist with an intimacy that could not be denied. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My teeth clenched hard enough to stop a furious scream from escaping. Diane claimed she wanted to help me clear out Carol's belongings so I could move on with my life while secretly using our money to build another home with another man. This level of betrayal had gone far beyond the limits any father could endure. My son was breaking his back under the heat and grease of the repair shop to earn that money, and she was spending it to support her lover and finance a luxurious secret life. Every structure of trust I had built around that woman collapsed into rubble. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the two traitors climbing into the car together. My mind ran at full capacity, calculating the proper punishment. A controlled demolition was already being prepared. I could not allow Marcus to suffer one more ounce of damage from this parasite. But before exposing everything I needed to return to the nursing center one more time, there was one final detail I needed to verify to complete Diane's file of crimes. a detail that would leave her with absolutely nowhere to hide. I immediately returned to Raymond's room. The anger inside my chest still burned like a high-pressure furnace. I forced myself to control my breathing so my face would not reveal anything unusual. Raymond looked slightly surprised to see me come back so quickly. I walked over to his bed and asked about the mechanical hand therapy machine. It was the specialized rehabilitation device Marcus claimed he had ordered from overseas 3 months earlier. The machine cost thousands of dollars and was designed to restore dead muscle tissue back to life. Raymond looked at me and gave a bitter smile. He slowly shook his head. His thin, trembling hand curled stiffly in front of me as he spoke softly. "There is no machine, brother. I guess the kids have just been busy lately and have not had time to buy it yet." The kindness in my younger brother's voice drilled straight through my heart like a steel bit. The truth had become so naked and obvious that no further calculations were necessary. I walked directly to the front desk of the nursing center with complete determination. I demanded that the accounting staff print the full transaction and payment history for room 12. The young employee saw the seriousness on my face and did not hesitate for even a second. The information displayed on the computer screen hit me like a precision demolition hammer. The room fees and service costs had not been paid for 8 months. The entire care system keeping Raymond afloat had only been surviving on the original minimum deposit. Every dollar my son earned through sweat and exhaustion had been drained away without mercy. The fire of hatred inside my chest exploded violently, but I forced myself to maintain the cold discipline of an engineer. I did not solve disasters with uncontrolled anger. I solved them by calculating structural loads and preparing for a perfect controlled collapse. I gathered the overdue payment statements and walked out of the nursing center. Diane's list of crimes was now complete down to the final specification. Now it was time to track her next move and build a trap with absolutely no escape. I spent the next 2 days mapping out this betrayal like a structural survey. I followed Diane's white sedan to a luxury furniture store located in one of the city's newest wealthy suburbs. I parked my old pickup truck beneath the shadow of a massive old tree. Through the elegant showroom windows, I saw Diane and her lover standing together in the center of the display floor. They were choosing a large landscape painting for the wall. A sales employee bowed politely and referred to them as the owners of the new house. I stepped quietly out of my truck and slipped inside without drawing attention. I positioned myself behind a massive, reinforced concrete support column. In my hands was a long-range camera lens attachment. It was the same equipment I used for surveying construction sites and checking structural elevations. I carefully began selecting angles to gather physical evidence. The lens captured every detail perfectly. My daughter-in-law's smug expression, the way she wrapped herself around that man's arm with open affection. My aging hands trembled violently from the earthquake of rage building inside me. But the mind of an engineer had to remain completely steady. I was gathering precise technical measurements of deception. Every photograph became another piece of undeniable evidence. When this structure of lies finally collapsed, I intended to make sure not a single brick of Diane's world would remain standing. She would pay for every dollar she had drained from my family. I packed away the camera and walked quickly back outside before they noticed me. My field investigation file was now complete with ironclad evidence. The time had come to perform one final load-bearing test on Diane's greed. I drove home and picked up the phone to call Marcus and his wife. Then I delivered a piece of news that instantly activated Diane's hunger for money. I told them I wanted both of them to come over the following evening so we could sign an extremely important document concerning every asset I had accumulated over my entire lifetime. I invited the two of them over on Friday night with a very clear explanation. I told them I was getting old, and my health was no longer reliable. I said I wanted to transfer ownership of my suburban property and all of Carol's savings accounts to them. Just as I expected, greed immediately accelerated Diane's movements. She pushed Marcus to arrive 15 minutes earlier than planned. Diane walked into my house wearing an unusually enthusiastic smile. She constantly asked about my health with hollow, rehearsed concern. We sat around the wooden table in the living room. The yellow ceiling light illuminated a thick blue folder, placed directly at the center of the table. At that moment, it became the focal point of the entire room. Diane sat down on the sofa, and her eyes instantly locked onto the folder. Her smile bloomed like a poisonous flower under sunlight. She could barely hide the triumph leaking through every tiny movement. The atmosphere inside the room became unbearably tense. The pressure felt like an overloaded boiler moments away from exploding. Marcus looked at me with tired but sincere eyes full of devotion. He gently pushed the folder back toward me and spoke softly. "Dad, you do not have to do this so soon. We are still able to take care of ourselves." But Diane quickly interrupted him. She opened her purse and slid a fountain pen toward my hand. "If this gives you peace of mind, then we will gladly accept it, so you can rest comfortably in your later years." Her fingers trembled with excitement over the fortune she believed was about to become hers. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from a dangerous person before you had enough proof? Subscribe now to watch the truth finally come to light. I looked directly into Diane's eyes and picked up the pen. I lowered the tip toward the signature line of the ownership transfer papers. Diane held her breath and leaned forward eagerly to witness the moment she had been dreaming about. But the instant the pen touched the paper, I suddenly stopped. I slowly lifted my head and stared directly at my daughter-in-law's hopeful face. Then I smiled coldly. And with deliberate calmness, I flipped open the first page of the folder for both of them to see. A horrifying truth began revealing itself before Diane's eyes, and she instantly went completely silent. I did not sign the document. Instead, I calmly pushed the entire folder toward my son. "Open it, Marcus." The triumphant smile on Diane's face froze instantly. As Marcus turned each page, his expression shifted from confusion to complete devastation. Inside the folder were no inheritance papers or property transfer documents. Instead, there were crystal-clear photographs of Diane embracing another man outside luxury restaurants and furniture showrooms. Attached beside them were expensive restaurant receipts and copies of Raymond's unpaid medical balance statements. Marcus collapsed right in front of me. He lowered his head onto the wooden table as his shoulders shook violently from the pain of betrayal. Diane immediately realized that the entire structure of her lies had been dismantled down to the foundation. Every trace of fake sweetness vanished from her face. In its place came a sharp, hostile voice filled with anger and defiance. "Yes, I did all of it. So what? I am sick of this poor, miserable life and the smell of engine grease all over your son. I am a woman and I deserve a better life. A richer life." I slowly rose from my chair. I stood upright, like a load-bearing pillar refusing to bend beneath the storm. I looked directly into my daughter-in-law's furious, bloodshot eyes. My voice echoed through the living room with cold steel authority. "Take off my wife's earrings. Put them on the table beside those photographs. Then get out of my house." Diane's hands trembled violently as she removed the pearl earrings from her ears. She threw them onto the table with a cold, hollow clack that cut through the silence. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door like a defeated coward fleeing a battlefield. The room finally fell silent again. But the structure of my family had been permanently altered by this earthquake. Marcus lifted his tear-filled eyes toward me. I knew the road ahead for both of us would be painful as we cleaned up the wreckage left behind. But a new day was beginning, and together we still had one final mission left to complete. The divorce process moved quickly after that, because the physical evidence was impossible to deny. Diane walked away with nothing, and did not receive a single dollar from my family. The rotten structure had finally been removed completely from our lives. A few months later, Marcus and I returned to Raymond's nursing center. Today was a special day. We brought him the newest advanced hand rehabilitation machine ordered from overseas. The device would help restore the muscles damaged during the long months of neglect. I stood beside them and watched Marcus patiently guide Raymond's twisted hand onto the support handle. Warm sunlight poured through the window and illuminated the bright smile on my brother's face. At that moment, I knew the foundation of our family had finally been reinforced again. If you stayed with me until this moment, then I know this story touched your heart in some way. In the next video, I will share an even more intense story with you. Please help us with one small and quick thing. Like and subscribe. Many people watch without doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Sometimes you have to step out into the storm yourself to inspect which structures are still standing and which ones are beginning to crack. And when you discover damage, you must be willing to repair it. A house can only remain strong if its foundation is solid. A family can only survive if loyalty becomes the reinforced concrete at its core. Deception may appear smooth and polished like fresh paint on the outside, but time and pressure will always cause it to peel away. Love is not just words spoken carelessly or temporary emotions that disappear overnight. Love is something practiced consistently in everyday life. It means constantly inspecting and maintaining relationships with clear eyes, courage, and honesty.